And we are back again with the Pat Stedman podcast interview series. And we have today Tyler Todt.
Thanks so much, Pat. It's an honor to be on here, brother. When I first came onto Twitter a few years ago, you were one of the big names that I saw and instantly gravitated towards. So it's always an honor to get to chat with you, my man.
The honor is all mine, Tyler. I'm sure you get this in messages a lot, but you are just a huge beacon of light. I mean, just so much positivity comes out of your account, and I think it's really a tonic in general for a lot of the stuff that you see in the broader manosphere, whether it's commentary on male-female relations, politics, whatever. There's a tendency for a lot of doom posting, and you just never see it with Tyler. It doesn't exist.
I'll tell you, man, it's a pretty intentional choice. There are many times, if you were to look in my drafts right now, where I'm like, about ready to, and then I'm like, all right, man, take a breath, calm down, let's stay positive. This isn't gonna affect anything by going that route. So it's a pretty intentional choice to try and be positive. If you ask, my ex-wife of 10 years ago, if I was always a positive guy, or even my current wife now, the first couple of years of marriage, I was always not the most positive guy. So this has been a really intentional choice. And a lot of these daily habits kind of align with this. And so I always feel like, man, I'm going to try and bring that positivity that I've cultivated in my own life to wherever I go.
So this is really interesting to me because, a lot of people who aren't, let's say, very positive or very, very happy in general, they don't understand this idea of is it fair to say faking it until you make it? Like,
Yeah.
how do you kind of get yourself in the mode to be positive? If you're not feeling good, you just force yourself to say positive stuff anyway.
I mean, sometimes it's like that. I'll tell you, the biggest thing for me was, did you ever listen to the Joe Rogan podcast with Naval?
Mm.
It was like a legendary podcast 4.5, 5 years ago. And I remember Naval said something on there that really hit me. He said, if you're so smart, why aren't you happy? And
Yeah.
to me, I always had this mindset of, well, I wish I could be more happy, but I got too much busy stuff to do, or I got, too many important things, right? And so I really started to journal about that and think about that and say, my priorities are out of whack. I'm too stressed about business, money, all these things that society tells us to be stressed about. Okay, what if I take a step back and really ask myself some good questions? What really makes me happy? Does it really make me happy that I drive a $50,000 sports car that I used to, or now I drive an $8,000 soccer dad SUV? My day-to-day happiness doesn't matter at that. My day-to-day happiness is about, can I be where I want to be on my own time frame? Can I wear a tank top or no shirt? Do I, like, can I be around loved ones doing what I want to do all the time? And so really starting to cultivate my mind and my whole lifestyle around what truly makes me happy. I think that helps a lot. But of course, I still wake up on days, man. And, I got two 2-year-olds,
Mhm.
two 2-year-old boys, man. I mean, last week, I think alone, they did several $1,000s in damage to our outdoor fireplace. Like, it's, negative things happen, right? They're boys, they're going to break stuff. So in that moment, I always say you have that power of choice between kind of what happens, the stimulus out there, and you've got a moment to kind of pause and say, okay, do I want to let this dictate my day? Do I want to be negative? Guy cuts you off in traffic. Is this going to matter in 5 years? If it's not, I'm not giving it my attention, man. I'm going to choose to go that positive direction and just think about, man, I'm blessed that I have a car, right? I'm blessed that I get to go where I want to go when I want to go. And so I just reframe a lot. I've really been intentional about practicing that a lot. And that's how I kind of go about it.
Mm. Now you mentioned that you weren't always like this. So what was the pivot point? What made you kind of say, okay, you know what, I need to change this?
Bro, this is an embarrassing story, but I came home from work one day and I was managing the largest bank in the country for a few years and doing pretty well at that. I'd been promoted many times, but it stressed me out, and I didn't have a great marriage at the time. I was 20 pounds overweight, not lifting weights, so just all in my like a beer gut, out of shape, just not living a very good life. And I remember I drove home from work and a guy cut me off in traffic. And I got out of my car and started screaming at him, just so angry, man, over a guy cutting me off. I got home and my 2-year-old, little year and a half old daughter was there, and I started cursing, and my wife asked how my day was, and dude, it was like word vomit, just I hate this, I hate that. And it just hit me, man. There was a night right after that where my wife just kind of came up to me and said, Ty, it doesn't have to be like this. Like if you're not happy, we can work together to get you into a happier situation, or you can do, you're not stuck essentially. And dude, she left the room after saying that, and something rose up in me. I was 31 and a half years old, and I got a notebook, and I literally just journaled the man I'm going to be, who I'm going to choose to be from there on out. And I wrote down, I'm never going to complain again. I'm going to be the master of my own fate. Just because my boss is mean to me doesn't mean I'm going to allow that to have a bad day. Just because a client talks to me in a certain way doesn't mean I'm going to let that dictate my day. I'm going to be in control of my life. And so I just practice that over and over again. And when these negative things happen, I just take a pause and just say, okay, I'm going to choose to reframe it and put it in a positive light and go about my day the best that I can from there.
Mm. So I'm really curious about this because, obviously I'm a dating and relationship coach. So I'm curious about how this change affected your relationship.
Sure. Well, I always say, man, and I'm sure you could echo this from a lot of the stuff that I've read that you put out, but kind of as the man goes in the relationship, I think women have an amazing gift to magnify and amplify sort of the energy we put out. And so, I used to be a guy that I would actually complain that my wife was negative.
Yeah.
Meantime, if you were to read my old text to her throughout the day, it was just all complaints. My staff didn't show up on time. My boss said this. I'm hit, everything was a complaint. And then I'd be angry when I got home and she was telling me how hard the kids were or how stressful her day was, and for some reason, I could never connect those two. Well, once I started to change that and change my life and start to tell my wife, hey, I'm going to choose to do these things. I'm going to get up early and work out every day. I'm going to stop complaining. I'm going to do this stuff. The first time I told her, she was kind of like, yeah, whatever. You've said you're going to make some changes before. But an amazing thing happened a couple months later. I'll never forget, man. She pulled me aside and just said, whatever you got, I want it. Like I can tell you're a new guy, and if you were to see our conversations now, 4.5, 5 years later, dude, my wife is my biggest encourager. Like on days when I don't feel it, my wife is like, you got this. I'm so proud of you. You're the best dad, leaving me notes. And so I think that, men will often come to me and complain, my wife is so negative, my this, and I always say, you got to look in the mirror first, and there's probably a reason for that. I know there definitely was in my relationship because it's gone 180 since I turned. I've seen her turn.
So do you think a lot of guys, because I can see a lot of guys saying like, well, I'm not negative. I'm not negative. That they don't think that they're negative. They think that they're a positive guy, but then their wife has an emotion and it affects them. And so would you say that if a guy is getting emotionally affected by his woman, that he is actually he's got a lot of negative emotions himself, he's just maybe burying them and he's not being honest about the fact that they even exist?
I think it's a really good point you bring up. Yes, I would definitely say that they're probably buried down deep, and we're kind of taught to not be vulnerable and not talk about those things. And then I often think too, a lot of times I would give my other people would have said I was positive. Some of my coworkers, I could turn on a pretend face for them, right? But my wife got the brunt of it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of what guys fall into sometimes is we buy into this lie. Well, as long as I give my clients my best, I should show up at home and dinner should be on the table. Everything should just be in place. I'm the king of the castle sort of thing. Well, you're only the king, man, if you're leading in that way. And I think that was the mistake that I made was, yeah, I would give my best often to work and my wife would get my leftovers. I mean, dude, I don't think I took her on a date in 5 years, like, I mean, it was just crazy or in a couple years until I really made that turn. Hey, I'm going to pursue you again. I want to date again. I want to, I'm going to change my life and come after you. Well, I didn't really give her any reason to sort of, she stuck by my side to her credit, but we didn't have a very we were more roommates at that point, before that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, I wonder sometimes, and you look at a lot of the complaints that you see in the red pill about women, not to say that they're like without merit necessarily, but how much effort does the guy actually put into the relationship? Like, I think because a lot of red pill guys get so focused on, well, be a high value, desirable man. It's kind of like if you are a high value, desirable man, then you can literally like you don't have to do anything else. She should just like then be after you all the time. And if she's not, then she's not a good woman. She's not a keeper, you know. And I have to deal with this a lot because I work in the red pill space, but kind of more like almost deprogramming some parts of it. And it's like, well, you know, like desire obviously matters, but it's like you have to be a certain desirable level for the woman to want to be with you. And then at that point, most relationships start to decline because the guy stops, you know, providing comfort. You know, he's not doing the things that he did at the beginning of the relationship to pull her in. He's not creating this kind of, you know, making her feel like she's loved and like she's accepted. Because I think, you know, a lot of women, if the guy's desirable, it's like she'll deal with a lot in the beginning to kind of chase him because she wants him. But then once she gets him, she's looking for the connection. And so you simply being that guy, it's not. So I think, you know, this is one of the things I really love about you is that when a lot of guys talk about this stuff about like dating your wife, and I don't mean it with any disrespect, but a lot of times they don't necessarily come across as like a super, you know, masculine or higher energy guy. So I think sometimes it can kind of be like, is this just cope? You know, like,
Right.
but then we have you, right? We have you, and you're not that at all. I mean, you're athletic, you're high energy. I think it's like you're showing guys a different path for this.
I appreciate that. And I do think, yeah, there's a big thing to that too, right? Just because you're a high value guy, you know, I hear guys tell me all the time, and I'll ask them a question. I'm like, bro, you know, you're talking about, well, you know, Tom Brady and Gronk got this great communication and connection. I'm like, well, when's the last time you talked to your wife? Like, you know, like
Mhm.
you're so I used to watch 20 plus hours of sports every week, right? I knew about the St. Louis Cardinals draft picks coming up, but I hadn't asked my wife how her day was in a year, you know, or really listened or really cared. And so, you know, you show what you care about by where your energy and your focus goes. And I think, you know, as a man, you got to be intentional about that. And you got to think, okay, well, my wife committed to me. She chose me over 3.5 million other guys on this planet. I chose her over 3.5 million other women on this planet. When we're standing at that altar and we're saying I do, bro, she pictured a life of passion, a life of excitement, a life of all this stuff, right? Not a husband who's coming home beat down, gaining a bunch of weight, doesn't have any purpose, waking up complaining every day, right? Like, I mean, what you got to ask yourself some of these hard questions. Again, she's going to mirror a lot of your energy. And so you've got to decide, I'm going to put this kind of energy out there. Even if I don't get anything back initially, I promise you, if you keep doing this, it's going to turn.
Now, here's a difficult question, maybe. Um, how do you get guys to care? You know, it's because one of the things I see is that a lot of I don't know what kind of, you know, if it's childhood programming or if it's a defense mechanism. Um, but a lot of guys, it's like they want, you know, to have a girl, but they also want to be able to go and, you know, go after their purpose and, you know, spend time with the guys. And they have a real resistance to this sense of like a lot of times when a woman wants him to change in a certain way, the woman wants him to be more there, more connected. And to a lot of men, that feels like his freedom is getting sucked out of him. And so I think sometimes when you present this, it's like, well, maybe I should just become like a G and, you know, be so far above her in value that she just kind of has to accept it and she's going to be around because I don't want to have to forego doing all this stuff. I mean, what would you say to guys like that?
And I would say, you know, and I've talked to, you know, Dan Go on Twitter
Mhm,
as well.
mhm.
You know, we talked about this a little bit where when you have an on fire marriage and your wife, like, I guarantee you, man, Pat, if I hung up this call right now and I text my wife who's volunteering at our kids' school right now and I said, hey, honey, I really feel like I want to uproot the family and take us to Alaska. I have this calling to be a fisherman and I just want to go do. She would be like, okay, you know, it's really cold. I'm not, you know, I'm probably not fist bumping, but if you really feel called to do it, I will hop on board with you, you know. I will help you achieve your dreams, right? And like I think that's what these guys fail to realize, these red pill guys or whatever you want to call them, is that dude, if you put a lot of energy into your woman and you keep pursuing her and you have this on fire connected relationship, she is your cheat code, man. Like, you know, I went to my wife 5 years ago and said, And I'm making six figures, managing a bank, whatever. It's a good job. It's safe. But I remember telling her, hey, I don't want to do this for a really long time. I want to transition out. Right. And I didn't really know how to yet. But I remember the first thing she said, it's like 3.5 years ago, actually. The first thing she said was, well, how do we do it? Let's get a notebook. Let's get a plan. How can I help? Like dude, I feel like there's 2.5 or 3 of me someday. Like when I look at the social media brand I've been able to build of, almost 100,000 followers across Twitter in less than 3 years, and clients and all of these things, man, I didn't even know how to create a free newsletter until my wife sat down with me and we worked on it together, and she could help me with a few things. And like, she's my ultimate amplifier. I say that to guys all the time. If you want to be better at business, if you want to she cooks the most healthy, awesome meals for me and my family, and loves doing it. Like, but I put a lot of energy into her, and I think in turn she puts a lot back. And I think that's what those guys, that's the piece that's missing, is they look at it like it's so restrictive, right? But I have the kind of relationship with my wife where, man, if I go tell her today, and she knows this, hey, I love being a dad, I love nothing more than being a dad. Once out of every few weeks, man, it's Groundhog Day with two
Mhm.
2-year-olds, right? And I'll literally tell her, I need a boys' day. I need to go to the strip. I need to play some poker, and then I need to walk around with some buddies and grab a steak and maybe a bourbon and then head home,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've always got the freedom to do that. And I think I give her that same courtesy. There's definitely times where she says, man, I'm just really having a burned out day. Hey, go meet a friend for a walk. Go take a girls' night, man. Go have fun. I got the kids, right? When you have this really good kind of ebb and flow, yin and yang, where you want to help the other person, man, I mean, it's not that hard, to be honest, as a guy. Like my wife always jokes about it. She's like, if you just tell us thanks a lot, show us that we're doing well, and give us compliments and reaffirm us and all these things, like we want to help you accomplish all of your dreams and all your goals.
Yeah, so that's a good segue because I mean, obviously your wife is a fantastic woman. How much do you think this is replicable with every woman? Do you think that there are a good number of women out there who just will be resistant to this kind of stuff under any circumstances, or they'll interpret, because if a woman has a lot of self-esteem issues, sometimes she interprets kindness as weakness, and then so there's can be kind of like a lashing out, or I'm just curious, like, because you've worked with other guys on this, you've had experience with it. Would you say that this is pretty much consistently replicable with women?
I'd say very, very replicable, but I'm not going to lie. I mean, I always tell guys you have to have this line in the sand that I'm going to improve me. I'm going to pour into her. I'm going to do everything I can to become the highest value man I can. But I'll be honest, Pat, like 4.5, 5 years ago, man, when we were on the brink of like saying the D word and right before I changed my life, and there was times where I literally had to say to myself and say to my friends and say to people like, you know what, either she's going to hop on board and come with me, or at least I'm going to, have tried everything I could and been the best husband that I could for this period of time. And then for the next girl, I'll be able to put that same energy in. I wasn't sure if she was going to hop on board, to be honest. And I've seen other guys who have gone months. I coached one guy I can think of in particular. Dude, he left love notes. They had not been intimate in, I think, over 12 years, and they'd been
Mm,
married for 18, just a bunch of kids and nothing. And so he starts leaving notes. He starts, sending her text in the morning, really showing her a lot of attention. And he got nothing in return for a couple months. And he was about ready to quit, man. And we just kept saying, man, slowly but surely she started to peel off those walls a little bit. And I'll never forget the text about 3.5 months in. Oh man, the floodgates have opened. It's we're not roommates anymore. This is amazing. Like she's pursuing me. And so I think it takes some women probably longer to get there. I mean, to my wife's credit, she is just an absolute perfect teammate. I always say God designed her just for me. It's like the perfect, every area I'm weak in, she's pretty strong in, and vice versa. So I think you need to be cognizant of that, young guys that are dating too. Man, see how she treats wait staff. Is she obsessed with status and society? See, will she jump on your mission, or is she always challenging you and pushing back?
mhm.
You got to filter out these things as you're dating, because I'm certain there are some women who just, what's that saying? They got a problem for every solution, right? And there's
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
some
yeah.
guys that are also like that, right? So when you're dating and figuring this stuff out, I mean, put yourself in some harder spots. Put yourself in some challenge. How do they respond to stress? Do they just withdraw and never want to talk about it? Or are they willing to come and meet you halfway and have a good conversation with you and grow together through it? And I think you got to decipher all that stuff as you're dating.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of that example that you gave with one of your clients and how it took such a long period of time, that for a lot of women, when there hasn't been connection or affection for a long period of time and the guy changes, very often at first she's just as cold. Sometimes she can even be worse because I think she doesn't trust it.
That's right. She's been burned before, right? Most likely.
Exactly. She's been burned before, and it's almost like, is this just something temporary? Is he trying to manipulate me? And I also think to a certain extent, so she's tests against it. So she's like, I'm not gonna trust it. I'm gonna be just as cold. Maybe I'm gonna be worse to see, like, does he really care? Because then I'm gonna, if he backs down or if he gets pissy, then I know that he was just horny or something. Like,
that's right. just trying to be good for one night to get it in, right?
Exactly. So kind of like on that topic, I mean, so here's another thing. So when you get into like a lot of the red pill stuff, the focus on is again, when it comes to sex, it has to do so much with desire. Like, you got to be a desirable man, and then she's gonna want to sleep with you. Okay. How does all this connection and affection? Okay, maybe she treats you better. Maybe she's supportive. Maybe she'll move to Alaska for you. No offense to people in Alaska. I'm sure it's great.
I'm sure it's wonderful there, but man, it's not
a certain type of person. I mean, honestly, I think it's beautiful. I've been there. I get it. I get it. But how does it affect sex drive? How does all this stuff, all the notes, the kind words of thank you, does that just make her, does that amp up her sexual interest in you as well?
Again, I think maybe not at first, right? Like, it definitely took a while before I felt like, even, a month or two where you said, I almost felt my wife push back a little bit against it. Like, I was the kind of guy who, man, for a couple years, I'm going to get up and work out tomorrow. She'd see me not get up. I'm going to start eating better next week. She'd see me not eat better. I'm going to leave. I'm going to not work this Saturday no matter what my boss says. Well, I'm going into work Saturday. She saw me lie to myself, lie to her. Hey, I'm going to go out for one drink with the buddies, but I'll be home in time to tuck the daughter in for bed. 3 a.m. rolls around, I'm pulling in an Uber, I'm toasted. Like, I think she saw me lie to myself and lie to other people a lot. And so there was that kind of coldness of, is this going to work? Is this not? Right? Like, I don't know. So I think there was some of that friction and some of that pushback, but I just woke up every day just bound and determined. I'm going to keep showing you this isn't some trick. This isn't something, and as I just got more into the self-improvement of just, dude, instead of we used to watch shows together all the time, man, instead of watching a show, I'd say, let's go read together. Let's do a plank challenge. Let's take a walk. Let's play a board game. Let's interact. Let's connect, let's do some of these other things. Well, you start to break down those walls and those barriers. And then it's just amazing to me as a man. I hope every single married guy can experience what it's like to have your wife initiate, what it's like to walk by your bedroom and have your wife say, hey, once you tuck the daughter in, like, I'm gonna be waiting here. Like, it's there's no better feeling than that. Than, the relationship I was in the first couple of years when we had our daughter was like, well, it's been a few weeks, like, it always felt like it wasn't, after the initial honeymoon wore off and the child life, we're both busy, we're working, until I really got serious, I think, about bettering myself. I just don't think I was that attractive, to be quite honest, man. I mean, I'm complaining all day. I'm low energy. I'm like, I'm overweight. It's, as much as guys want to say, well, it helps to have a six pack or whatever. I mean, honestly, man, people see the way you treat yourself, and let's be honest, we're humans. I'm going to judge people. The first thing I see, is their appearance. And I think my wife is going to see, well, am I doing what I say I'm going to do? Number one, am I a man of integrity? Those things do I have ambition more than just job? Do I have ambition to be a great father? I mean, she tells me a lot, man. I'll have my phone in the other room. Sometimes I'm on the ground playing with the kids. I'll come back to a text of like, I just can't wait to jump you tonight. Watching you with our kids is nothing like turns me on more than just seeing you on the ground, wrestling, throwing them all around. All, just being an on fire guy, I think, is just going to make women want that more. I mean, there's no, it's, if you flip it and say, well, why do men desire women? Well, they're beautiful, right? They're pretty physically, but also like, dude, if you break down their the characteristics, I mean, I love watching my wife be a mom to our kids. I love that we have this joint mission together, and like we talk about these bigger things, and I feel like we connect on even a deeper level than just physical. It's almost like our souls connect at times. And I
So
think every woman would want that.
yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree, and I think, to mollify maybe some of the people who are a little, suspect sometimes, you're you also, I mean, so much of this was not just treating her better, it was treating yourself better, and I think, you can't really treat her better unless you treat yourself better, because when you're doing this stuff, you say you're going to go to the gym, but you don't go to the gym. You say you're going to change this up, come home on time, but you don't. There's a level of yourself like that you have contempt for yourself, and inevitably that's going to get projected outward towards her. And I
100%.
think and I think a lot of guys can, if they really think back, they can relate and say, those days that you were really on fire and you felt really good about yourself for how you conducted yourself throughout the day, and let's say your woman is a little bit in a off mood, you can feel it doesn't affect you even in that
Mhm.
moment, and you're just kind of like, like
It's
what's
true.
going,
Yeah.
like, and it then diffuses her mood, right?
Mhm.
Then she kind of shifts relatively quickly afterwards, seeing the way that you respond to it. But when you get reactive, even if you don't like overtly get reactive, but you're affected, and you get kind of like pissed and tense. That comes from you not feeling good about yourself, because otherwise you wouldn't care. You know, it's kind of like if some other random person isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like, why would you care? You don't care about that. I mean, like, but
Right.
it's interesting to think about that. Now, I'm curious also though, because when you're talking about a lot of this sexual dynamic, it's very like there's a very like romantic and sense of really feeling connected to them, and seeing them for who they are, and that itself being arousing. You see how she's a great mother, and that like that draws you to her. So I mean, how does porn mess guys up in this regard?
Phew, dude, I'm glad we got into that, man. Because yeah, I think that was the biggest thing, and I think it's so normalized that, well, if it's been a week or two, just go take care of it yourself, right? And dude, I was a guy who went to church on Sundays and pretty frequent. I mean, I didn't know porn stars' names, right? I wasn't like a fan or anything, but that's what I turned to if it had been a week or so. And then I think what that does to your mind is it just subconsciously says, why isn't my wife like that? I'm going to compare my wife to that. And it's so unfair, man. Number one, because let's be honest, man, that girl's getting paid 2 grand. She's high out of her mind on crack or whatever she's doing,
Yeah.
like, and your wife has been taking care of your kids all day or working at a job all day or whatever she's doing all day, a million different things too, right? And so I think it's so unfair to put that on women. April 23rd of 2020 was the last day. I remember I texted a couple buddies and I said, man, I'm done ever casually viewing any images, anything. I remember I sat my wife down that day and I said, hey, I'm on this self improvement journey. I said that you're not going to like to hear this, but I'm going to tell you a hard truth. I have gone to this. I'll never do it again. I will only look at you. I will only desire you. I will only think and dream and lust and fantasize about you. And it was hard for her to hear, I think, right away, but man, did that flip a switch right away. And I always tell guys they're really cheating themselves out of a much healthier, better, more fulfilling sex life with their spouse when they go to porn. Not to mention all the ED, all the we could mention the
Right.
a million different negative side effects from this stuff, right? But I think when your woman knows that, dude, you only are looking at her and you only think about her, I mean, my wife will kill me if I say some of the things, but some of the things she's done for me
Mm.
since doing that, right? Of, hey, if you ever want to look at something, I got a gift for you, so to speak. It's just that would have never been a thing 4 or 5 years ago. But when she knows she's the only one that you really lust after, you really think about, that there's a really powerful thing that happens there.
Do you think that it's necessary to tell your woman that you've had the problem? Because I think like a lot of guys, if they've been going through this for a while, that's like the big thing that they would be afraid of. They're like, I can deal with it on my own. But I think about that. I'm like, well, are there just negative consequences from telling her in the moment? But then the flip side of it is part of the reason that porn is able to feed on guys' mind is because of the shame.
Mm.
And so if it's like kept underneath and hidden, then it sort of can grab onto you again, whereas when you talk about it out in the open, when you're open about it, it sort of diminishes the transgressiveness probably of the act. So I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's necessary to or optimal to tell your wife or your girlfriend that that's what you've been doing?
I love that word optimal. I would say, I think it's probably a little dependent. I have this thing, man, that I think it's the greatest gift I can give my wife, and the greatest gift that she can give me is to let each other know exactly who we are, our
Mhm.
flaws, our shortcomings, how we can help. How do I know how I can best help her? If she just tries to put on a strong face and a brave face and doesn't tell me when she's actually hurting, what she's
Mhm.
actually struggling with. I want, as a man, I want her to tell me the things she's struggling with so that I can help, right? Well, I think if you flip that around, if she's any kind of woman that's worth anything, man, and you come to her humbly and say to her, "Hey, this has been a problem. I have some solutions." Now, don't come moping to her. I'm
Mhm.
addicted to this. I don't know what to do. I'm
Sure.
stuck. Oh, she doesn't want to be your mom, right? Like, she doesn't want to have to fix it. But when I came to my wife and sat her down, I said, I've already contacted a couple accountability buddies. I've taken measures on my phone to make sure I can't even get it. I've written myself notes about my daughter and things like that and put it in spots. I even changed my private browsing screen to a picture of my preacher so that if I were to ever open it up, I'd see my preacher sitting right there. And I just told her, hey, I'm coming to you with this. This is a level of trust. I want you to know I'm not happy about it, what I did in the past. I wish I had never done it. I think it's something that 99% of guys, if we're really honest, have partaken in or struggled with even at some point.
Mhm.
Most of the guys who do, oh, I've never, it's just not my thing. I've never, dude, I don't know, man. The way my mind works, I can picture an image from 25 years ago on the spot. That's just how guys, and when I explain that to my wife, how that works, how guys' minds work, how I don't know, man, that visual is such a big thing and has a hold on us. Her first thing was, well, when you feel tempted, let me know how I can help. I want to help. And
Mhm.
so I think if you want to have a really next level, on fire, open communication, just beautiful marriage where you're complimenting each other, you feel super connected. I mean, I don't recommend hiding anything, right? Like, I think it'd be most optimal nearly always, unless you're married to like a psycho who just doesn't want to have any
Right.
kind of communication with you and work on things together, in which case you probably have bigger problems.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And what I'm thinking about also when it comes to porn is just how being able to share stuff when you open up about everything with a woman. I mean, guys will talk about how things get boring, things get dull. I think so much of that has to do with the fact that you have to go deeper. And a lot of relationships after the honeymoon period, they hit this wall because there's a fear of actually going to, like you guys get stuck in sort of maybe a dysfunctional pattern,
Mm.
but everyone's too afraid to like show their real vulnerability. And that's actually how you get to the next level of excitement, because that's like the barrier. Beneath that barrier is the gold.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be willing to say, okay, this is, like you said, you have to be, obviously, I'm going to be dealing with the problem I'm making. It's not like you're just complaining to her or anything about it, but revealing that stuff, revealing the stuff that you're really afraid of, that's intimacy. You don't have intimacy if you don't reveal what you're afraid of. You're kind of, you can play act it. So I think that's like the big challenge for guys. And I think because a lot of it is vulnerability, it has such a negative connotation with a lot of guys because of the way in which they are vulnerable. So how would you recommend that guys go about and do that?
Yeah, it's hard, man, because guys egos, and that's another thing where I always tell my wife, it's like, I want you to know me, and I can be up on cloud nine, and dude, I can lead retreats with men and come back and feel like a champion. And my wife has the ability, truthfully, man, to make me feel that tall or make me feel that big. And she's the one person on earth that kind of has that. And so for me to open up to her and be vulnerable at times, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, literally, Pat, like, I probably had to think about having that conversation with her for a week or two before I actually had it. And it was like, okay, I'm going to do it tonight. Yeah, she's a little cranky tonight, maybe tomorrow. Like, it was a hard thing to do. But I always say, if you keep the peace on the outside, or you keep the peace by not having these hard conversations, it starts a war within. And I think that's where a lot of guys are, right? Well, maybe she does this certain thing that I don't really like, but might cause a fight by bringing it up. Maybe we are just in a routine where it's like, well, every Tuesday we just have the same kind of intimacy and it's kind of boring. But if I bring it up, man, there is that risk, right? I could get negative feedback. And so I think, you have to, as a man, decide, number one, do you want to get to the end of your life and just say, well, I kept it safe. I kept the peace. I played it safe. I don't really think so. I mean, I think you need to push yourself in all areas, whether that's physically, mentally, spiritually, sexually, whatever that is, in healthy confinements, and be open and be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm not happy about this, or I think we could improve in this, or wouldn't it be spicy if we did this? Yeah, there is that feedback, and that's what's scary, right? That's why you see so many people like that are just addicted to porn, Netflix binges, all these things. Well, why is that, man? If you really break that down, there's no feedback. Like, if I'm watching Netflix and I don't like the show, I just change the channel. Nobody's telling me you suck for picking that show. If I'm watching porn, in my mind, I can always be the superstar because I can put myself in that place. There's no feedback, right? And so I think to get anything in life, whether that's business, social media growth, your body, whatever it is, relationships, you got to be willing to take some negative feedback, or at least not negative, but some hard conversations, and be able to grow through those. And I think it's scary. I mean, there's no way around it. Like, I do have a lot of guys that say, man, I'll work on the porn thing, but I'm not telling my wife,
Yeah.
And I always kind of worry about those guys a lot more, because, man, if it's not in the open yet, there is a level of that shame. There is a level of that. I mean, I don't know how biblically based you are or whatnot, but when I look back at, like, Adam and Eve, what's the first thing they did when they knew they sinned? They went and hid. And I
Yeah.
know that was my thing, man. If I were to partake in porn, I wouldn't even listen to Jesus music for a few days. I just wanted to hide. I knew it was not a good thing. I knew it wasn't honoring my wife, my daughter. That was somebody else's daughter that I just watched. If you really think about it, that I knew these weren't good things. And so I did have this level of shame. And so if you really want to feel it fall off, man, and feel free, and you
Yeah.
can even revert this back to our early conversations. How are you so positive? Bro, I ain't got to hide anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's a pretty freeing feeling to just say, I am who I am. I'm going to put myself out there. You're either going to like me or you're not. That's a you problem if you don't, because I'm going to go on still living my life, right? Like, I think you just get to a point, like, as a man in life, where you say, like, I look up to you, man. I think you're a great guy. I like all the stuff you put out. But to be honest, if after this podcast you're like, hey, Ty, just that sucked. You suck. I'm not using this. Like, I'll literally say to you, like, Pat, I'm sorry it didn't go well, man. But hey, go tuck your kids and have the greatest day, bro. I'm going to go trick or treat. Like, it won't affect me. You know what I mean? Like,
But
I've
you know
gotten
what?
used to. Go
That
ahead.
comment would affect the person who would do that. You know what I mean? Like, let's say we have this evil Pat. Just do this evil Pat hypothetical individual who did say that to you after the podcast, and you responded as you just said. You'd be like, oh, I'm sorry about that. Well, have a great night with your kids and everything. That evil Pat would be pissed off.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
Like, what
100%,
do you
man.
mean? You're supposed to, get angry, or you're supposed to try to fix it. There's some, it's like this lower consciousness kind of looking for someone to polarize against. right?
That's such a
Looking for
good
their
point.
some kind
That's
of
right.
interest.
That's why people get so angry on Twitter when they come spew hate at me and I just say, "Hey man, I'm sorry you're having a bad day." Like I don't really partake in yelling at strangers on the internet. So go do something positive. Go for a walk, put on some great music, go have a call your mom, go have a great day, man. God bless. And
Yeah.
they flip out. They don't know how to respond to that. But I think, again, I go back to that feedback, and it's scary sometimes to put yourself out there. But if you really want to grow as a man, and especially as a man in a relationship, you just have to be willing to do that, or you're going to be stuck at those same levels, I think.
Now, just another last kind of comment on porn and lust, and it's lust in general. I'm curious what you think about this. I mean, obviously, you feel ashamed looking at porn, and so that causes you to close off. And then there's all sorts of maybe distortions that you see because, like you said, you have some girl who's on drugs who's getting fucked or whatever, and it's like not a realistic kind of situation. um but what do you think? There's a component of lust that, like, one of the reasons that porn is so negative for relationships is because it makes men hate women on a
Mm.
certain level, because it's kind of like you crave this object of desire, but then in a certain sense it controls you. And and you, because one of the things that's interesting that you see, like, porn kind of has a funnel. There's like super vanilla basic stuff, and then it goes to more advanced scenes, and honestly it can go really far down there. Some guys, remember I had one guy who contacted me, um who was like addicted to like transsexual porn, and was now like seeing escorts, like transsexual escorts. He'd been so like warped by it. um but one of the things that you see is it becomes more and more like violent and aggressive and more extreme. I think that's the word, more extreme. And I've thought about that. I'm like, is that because guys, I mean, maybe there's some sort of like cortisol spike that enhances the arousal. Like they get maybe a little bit numb from the basic stuff. They have to go to that. But I also wonder, like, how much of it is that they start to hate women. They want to see women like in pain, or like really, because it's just, and then that gets thrown out onto their wives later on, that there's this resentment, like, that she isn't the whore, but then if she were to be the whore, they'd also hate her for that.
Right. She can't win in that situation,
Can't win.
right?
She can't win. And you see this a lot with like because some guys, and honestly it happens from a lot of conservative cultures, because I think it creates some kind of psychic split where they have this serious Madonna whore complex, and they'll even say sometimes like, well, their wife needs to be this really good girl, and but then they see prostitutes and all sorts of like, and they'll want their wife to be a different kind of woman than that, but yet it's really interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I've never really thought about it in that way. I will say the first thing I thought of when you brought that up is, and I've talked to a couple people about this in the 2.5 or 2 years and 10 months or whatever it's been, and since I've viewed any kind of porn or images, I've really seen a healthier version of myself with females.
Yeah.
Man, I just, I'm ashamed to admit it, but when you look back, man, and you almost, when you're looking at that stuff and that becomes normalized, you almost start seeing other women in that light.
Yeah.
Well, do they do that kind of thing? Do they, like, and it's such an unhealthy, just toxic kind of mindset. I don't know, man. Yeah, I think porn is just, it's poisonous, man.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it's just so accepted in our culture as just normal. I mean, I was 10 when I was introduced to it, man. I think most kids are really young, and it's like that thing of, like, you talked about that cortisol spike. It's usually like just a Playboy or somebody's naked and you realize you like that, you know. But then that's usually not enough. You need the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And what's really interesting is I started writing one day about, I don't know why. I think I was doing a thread on how I quit porn. And I went down a couple rabbit holes on it, and I found that almost every single rapist that's in prison that's interviewed has started with porn and just worked their way up through these kind of levels you were talking about then I had to act on it. then I started out just softcore, and that wasn't enough. And then I had to watch women being abused, and then I had to abuse them. Then I had to do it without them wanting it. Then I had to, and when you heard these guys interviewed, you could just see the level of evil and how warped their mind had been. And that's what blows me away about kind of the, I hate to say it, but the feminist movement that's, oh, go sleep with hundreds of guys and porn is great. This dude, it's so hurtful to women more than anybody, right? Because if guys just view you as this object and this does it, what does that make you? You know, like they're just gonna spit you up and toss you out. It's kind of, it's a really weird dynamic that's happened in our culture as everything's kind of gotten all about sex. Porn is so mainstream now that I just think it's so harmful, man. And it's, I don't know, it's everywhere. I cannot tell you the number of preachers that have reached out to me on Twitter DMs from anonymous accounts and said, "Man, can you pray for me?"
Yeah.
I had one guy say, 26 years I've been leading a church. I've been addicted for 26 years. I can't overcome it. And I'm like, man, the hold that that has on guys, you know, is just, I don't know, man. It's sad. I don't quite know what to do about it. I always feel like I've just kind of been mentally like, once I decide something, I'm going to decide something, and that's going to be it. But I know there's a lot of guys who just have that. They can't get away from it, you know?
Well, I wonder from this conversation that, in a certain sense, we need to depathologize it. And what I mean by that, it's not the right terminology. We need to depathologize. I'm not using the right word because it's a pathology. What I'm trying to say is that we need to be open about it being a problem.
Phew, yes.
Whereas right now, it's like it's either not a problem or it's something. It's a problem that you need to like can't tell anybody about. And
Yes.
those two things feed on each other,
That's right.
right? And I think if we are just open and saying, hey, yeah, this is a real messed up thing, it's poison, and yeah, like a lot of guys are addicted to it, and they shouldn't be ashamed of the fact that they are, because it's been, I mean, honestly, the way I look at it, and I don't want to like take away from people's experience who really had rough trauma, who really had like physical sexual trauma. But I think in terms of how it affects people's brains and how it rewires them, I do think it is like sexual trauma to a certain extent, especially when you have it occurring to younger kids who don't have a whole handle on their own sexuality. It's kind of like grooming in a certain sense. It's like if you were to take some like 12-year-old and if you were to like, fondle them and made them feel a certain sensation, like you can totally mess up their entire orientation towards sex because it didn't happen in an environment where they were fully like open to.
Hmm.
Like if you make someone feel good in a context where they don't want to feel good, you can totally screw up their brain. And that's a lot of sexual dysfunction comes from that. So I do think we have like, because when you look at relationships in the macro, there's so much trauma and there's so much damage. And while I do think you can look at the family system and you can look at how, lack of good role models, and that's part of it, there's also something that's going on a sexual level that's really like bedrock issue. And when I look at further back generations, you don't see that at all. And there were broken families. That stuff existed before. I mean, maybe it wasn't as normal, but you had like very violent fathers and stuff like that. And yet, it just doesn't seem like there was quite this degree of,
Depravity almost.
depravity. Yeah, depravity. Yeah, like the whole feminist movement, as you've kind of mentioned here. I mean, it is really like women trying to accept self-degradation.
Yeah, which is so bizarre, man. It's
Like own being like degraded.
right.
Like it's not actually degradation if you're owning it, then it's empowerment. And it's like,
Yeah, it's a bizarre dynamic. Two kind of points on that I think of are, one, I don't understand, and I've asked a lot of these preachers why we don't talk about this, why this isn't more, preachers are very quick to talk about you should give to the church, you should not be XYZ, right? You shouldn't be the, but I don't hear, and I listen to 3 or 4 sermons a week a lot of times. I don't remember hearing one on pornography in the last 3 or 4 years since I've listened to 3 or 4 a week. The dangers of it, how we're preventing it, how it's ruining men, how we need to protect our children. Nobody talks about it. And I remember being in a group called Rooted about 5 years ago, and I brought this up. There was a group of 10 men, first kind of men's community thing I'd ever been in. And they said, "What's one thing you're struggling with?" Well, I'm the idiot because I'm a talker, so I go first, you know.
Mm.
And I literally said, man, I'm ashamed of it, but sometimes I do look at porn and I feel like it has a little bit of a hold on me. No one else said, "Oh yeah, man, me too." Oh, that's too bad, Ty. That's too bad. And I remember walking out of that group and being like, "That's BS, man. You can't tell me 11 other guys have not looked at, they're all married guys. That's just, but no one wanted to talk about it, own it, admit it. And that's why I like these spaces and the group of community that we have on Twitter. And we're willing to talk about it. And I think until you're willing to talk about it, nothing's going to change, right? It's just going to keep getting worse and worse. If there's money in it, people are going to keep doing it until you say, "Man, this is polluting our children, our families, our society." I mean, brother, I'm not afraid of much these days. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm not afraid of a lot of things. I'll tell you one thing I'm afraid of is my 7-year-old daughter starting to date in 9 or 10 years by a bunch of boys who have now been looking at pornography every day for 5 and 6 years.
Yeah.
And that scares me to think when they're 10 and that they're all getting smartphones at 10, sometimes before, and they have access to this stuff for years and years. And now that is what is normal to them in their mind. This is all that women are for, right? I've been seeing this for 2000 straight days now, and now I'm starting to date, and this is just what is normal, right? And I mean, that terrifies me to a certain aspect, and I don't have a lot of solutions. I like talking about this stuff because I think, how do we combat this? How do we fight this? I think it starts with strong dads having these conversations, bringing awareness to it. But what do we do to fight it? Because it's a big problem.
One of the things I've noticed with conservatives in general is that they're really afraid to fight these issues. They're afraid to address a lot of the issues. So it's kind of like they're not tolerant about it. They're not open and okay about it, but they just don't. It's like, it's bad. Don't do it. It's bad. They're like, okay, but then that creates actually a pull towards the transgressive aspect of it. And so
then you get more people just hiding it and being in shame and not really talking about it, and they're kind of closet addicted, which I think is even worse,
Right. So you have people who say, "This is bad, don't do it," and then you have someone else say, "It's not that bad. He's lying to you. Come over here, check it out." Like, oh, let me see. Whereas if they were really, I think, preparing their children to sort of do battle in this world, they'd say, "Look, this is what's going on. This is how it affects you." Like,
right.
Really be honest. It affected me for a long time. I had to go off. I had to deal with it. I mean, I have a very similar story to you, Tyler. Like, it was definitely a mind virus. Absolutely a mind virus. And it twists so much in your head around. And it's especially twisted because when you're out dating, I mean, there's a lot of girls who they've seen it themselves, and they're trying to respond to what guys want. So then they try to perform as if they are like porn stars in order to try to be appealing to the guy. So they're completely out of their own body, and everybody's just like, they're not actually connecting with each other. They're performing. It really is it's a massive mess. It's a massive mess. And I think, what you like, I'm a Christian as well. And I think one of the issues that you see in the church is that a lot of pastors are too afraid to really speak truth to power. It's like, well, we'll be Christians, but we're going to just go in this little tiny zone here where it's still safe to talk about these things. You don't offend people. It's like, no, you should be going out there. You should be pissing off tons of people. You're pissing them off all the time. You should be like Jesus, flipping over the tables.
Yeah. It definitely wasn't Jesus's approach, man. He didn't come here to not offend people. they killed him for offending the wrong people,
I know, but it's like, it's so much of how they've like repositioned him as being this sort of like milquetoast guy who's like, okay, I'm just gonna go on the cross and die now. How did this for you? Really nice,
Yeah, it's true, man. And dude, something hit me really hard that you brought up of how we should be arming and equipping our kids. My dad, greatest dad in the world, to be honest. My just, he's my hero. But I remember him kind of having a very not talk about sex, and we didn't really talk about this stuff. It
Yeah.
was just something you didn't talk about, right? But I do remember my dad sitting me down one day and we talked very, very long and serious about drugs and how he had a friend that had died from just doing drugs once. We talked about Lenny Bias, who just did cocaine one time and it killed him. And dude, I think back and it's like light bulbs are going off as you're saying that, I hit it pretty big when I was in college. I made $1 million playing poker. And so, dude, I was at some of these Vegas parties where we had mountains of cocaine, and I never did it
Yeah.
because my
Yeah.
father imprinted into me from a very early age, dude, that stuff can kill you. You also, Ty, have an addicted personality. You don't want to mess with this stuff. It'll kill you. And I think, what if he had imprinted into me about pornography from a young age too?
Yeah.
It's as scary as that. And so now my big takeaway from hearing you say that is I need to make sure I imprint that on my sons, on my daughter. I need to make sure that I'm telling them this stuff is as damaging, if not more, than these hardcore drugs and these other avenues you can go down.
Yeah, we need to be comfortable talking about sex with our kids. Otherwise, other people are going to talk about sex with them.
That's right, man. And that's terrifying, right?
Now, just to switch gears a little bit here, there's something you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to return to it. So obviously you pull, because you mentioned about the boundary, like you have to have a line in the sand. You have to still maintain boundaries with your woman, but we know the feminine grows by praise. So, but at the same time, it's not to say that women are always acting like, that they're always they're human. They make mistakes, right? They can have some bad behavioral patterns themselves. So as a man, how do you walk that line between not being critical, but also guiding in the right direction, saying, hey, this is a problem that needs to be addressed? How do you do that without triggering something really negative response in a woman?
Man, I think you lead with love, right? I mean, I'm really big, and again, I can go back to this. You can tell by talking to me, the center of my life is going to be faith, and so I'm called to love my wife as Jesus loves the church, right? That's what he says. You should love your wife in that way. So if I really view my wife as a child of God, as I want what's best for her in every way, then it just becomes very easy. And I'll tell you, man, I see my wife sometimes struggling with anxiety or struggling with this or that. I'll say, hey, you know what? Come here. I'm gonna give you a big bear hug. I'm gonna go kneel beside the bed. I'm gonna pray over you. Let's talk about it. What can we do? How can I help? I see you struggling here. And I'll be honest, Pat, that my wife has done that for me. She's seen me stressed out. I take on way too much sometimes, man. And she'll lovingly pull me aside and say, babe, I'm so proud of you for all you're doing. And I love the fact that you want to crush X, Y, and Z. But when you go do 100,000 steps in a day, and then the next day you try and work out, and then the next day you try and sign that, at some point you got to rest. Like the creator of the universe rested, you got to rest, and she'll do it in a loving way. And so I try and take that too, man, is hey, if I see my wife doing something that maybe I just don't like, or maybe is harmful to her, you
Mm-hmm.
know, again, I'm not going to sit her down and just throw stones at her. I don't have any ground to stand upon to do that anyway, right? So why not just sit her down in a loving way? Let's pray about it. Let's talk about it. How can I help? Right? Like I want to be your number one supporter. Like if my wife does really well, guess who benefits the most in life from that? Me.
Yeah.
When my wife is clicking on all cylinders, man, our family's I'm clicking on all cylinders. But when she's dragging down, even if I'm up here and she's down here, we're not at our best, man. So I need to help her when she's struggling, and she needs to help me if I'm struggling. So I just approach it with love and in that kind of way.
So it sounds like on a practical matter, at this point, you guys have so much of a foundation of love that if that happened, if you were to go address what's going on, like that would be coming across from you, would be showing from you, and she would also not be expecting an attack from you because it's not in your nature. But go back. How many years was it at this point? 4.5 years? Is that when you
Four
guys
and a
were
half, 5 years, yeah.
4.5, 5 years? When you guys were having some problems, is the answer at that time period to just like focus on you and how you can build on the connection and just forget about, like, for that period of time, don't criticize her, don't go in and get involved with anything? Or is there, like, on a practical level, what do you do when you're already in like loggerheads, but she's doing some messed up stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm trying to think back to some of the stuff back then, and if I'm real honest, man, I know this is kind of a cheesy answer that guys would say, but like my wife's just always been a better person than me. So like she wasn't into more of the bad things that I was. She's always just been a better human, right? Like kinder and more empathetic and more things like that. So I'm trying to think of some things she was doing back then that I didn't really like. Um, and I could say like nagging or complaining or maybe saying a thing of if I went to see a friend at night, well, I felt like I was going to pay for that maybe the next day, like
Yeah, yeah.
things like that. So yeah, I remember then it's on me, and I go back to like what Jocko Willink says. That was one of the first books. I credit this book with saving my marriage, actually, Pat, is Extreme Ownership. And so I would say, okay, if she's complaining about that to me, or making me feel bad for going to see a buddy, then it's my fault that I'm not conveying to her how important that is to me. And how, as a guy, I need some guy time every month set aside so that it fills my cup so that I can come back and be that on fire guy. So I must not be doing a good enough job explaining that to her. Now, if I were to explain that to her and she didn't get it, and I tried again and she didn't get it, and I tried again and she didn't get it, at some point, I guess you just have to realize, fortunately, I didn't have to deal with that. Maybe you just do you and you just pay the price when you come home. I don't know what that is, right? But I think I always go back to that ownership. And if you hear me and my wife, we still argue. We still don't agree. I mean, when COVID first hit, man, we didn't agree on the best response, dude. I was like a month in, I was taking my daughter down to the park when it was closed and we were ripping down the signs so we could play. My
Yeah.
wife's way more like follow some of the rules, that we didn't agree on everything. But, when we would talk about it, you would hear us say things like, well, I need you to understand, or I'm sorry I didn't clarify that enough, or that's my bad that I didn't explain to you how important it was for me to get the kids outside and for me to show them that just because somebody says it's bad for you doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. We're going to be the masters of our own fate and decide what we're going to do. So you would hear us say things like that. Hey, I need to do a better job communicating. And so I think if you approach life like that, whether it's true or not, Pat,
Mm.
you know, maybe it's not true that you're not communicating well enough. But if you always put the ownership back on yourself, guess who's in control then? Who still has power? Who still can say, I can improve on that. It's on me. Okay, maybe I need to sit her down. Maybe I need to take her for a walk. Maybe I need to get a notebook out and diagram how critical it is for me to get this time and not feel like when I come home, I'm getting nagged at or whatever that is.
Yeah, and it seems like also that you're letting her know what you need for yourself, but a lot of times women will have an issue with that because they don't feel like they're getting their own needs met.
Mm,
So it's like you're being selfish because you're
right.
going out. So I think especially when you pair that with encouraging them to meet their own needs, because I think a lot of women, especially like, I think this is a paradox a lot of guys don't get, is that some of the best women out there can have nagging tendencies and cannot want you to do stuff because they it's not obviously a good behavioral pattern, but the reason that they're doing it is because they're literally denying their own needs all the time. When it comes to children
Mm,
and even in the relationship, you may not receive it as much like that, but in their own mind, they feel totally empty that they've constantly been giving themselves to other people. And I think the trap that guys will get into is that she's so negative and she's always trying to like get me to do stuff. She's trying to control me. It's like, well, no, she's doing that because she's empty, and that you
yep.
need to help her, guide her, and maybe take things off her plate so she can focus on developing her sense of self, because maybe that happened from her father, maybe that happened from an ex. She
Mm.
doesn't she feels very small, and you're actually the one who in her feeling like it's all about you.
Mm. Man, I think that's such a good point. Most women, to generalize a bit here, but they're such givers. And there's this like funny meme, I think, that there's like one apple left, and the mom goes to get it, and she says, "Oh, I'm gonna save that for the kids because they'll want that the next day." And then the dad sees the same apple and he just starts eating it, and he's like, "I'll just run to the store and get a new one."
Dude, I've done that so many times, like
Yeah,
a billion times.
but I think it goes to show
Yeah.
that women more so, and again, generally speaking, there's always outliers and there's always different things, right? But most of them are like just so giving that it can become martyrdom almost at some
Yeah.
point, you know? And so I think as a guy, if you're a true leader, what you need to do is see those things, identify those things, and help them. Like, dude, even last night, Pat, me and my wife were on a date, and an hour into it, man, we're getting dinner, we're getting a drink, and we're going for a walk, we're having some fun. And an hour in, she says, I just feel guilty leaving Tenley again, like I know we need these dates, but, and I paused her right there and I said, honey, there's 158 hours in a week. 155 of them, you are on fire as a mom. You deserve 3 hours away where nobody needs you. Let go of that guilt. Let go of that shame. You need to go out and let your hair down, have a couple drinks, have fun. We hire a sitter. Go do things for yourself. And I feel like I see that in my wife a lot where if I'm not encouraging her, man, call a friend up, go for a walk. She will always choose to sacrifice herself and her own cup to pour back into our family. Always to cover me. There's so like when I lead guys on retreats and I have guys come from all over the country to these retreats, they're 4 and 5 days. Dude, I mean, that's a lot on her, right? Like she's got all three. One time we had 3 1-year-olds when I was doing these, as we were fostering and adopting. And I would come home, I could tell she's burned out, but she's still sacrificing her, kind of lighting herself on fire to keep everybody else warm, so to speak. And so I feel like that's my job then as a leader and as the man of this house to ensure that she gets that time to get filled back up. And we talk about this a lot, hey, when we look at the schedule, it's not just, hey, what's times for me to go to the gym this week? When are we getting you to the gym? When can I take all the kids? I think as a husband, if you're not doing these two things every single week, you're falling short.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure your wife gets 2, 3 hours every week where you have all the kids and she has no responsibilities. She's not making food. She's not doing laundry. She's not doing dishes. She's not cleaning floors. She's not scheduling family stuff. She is reading a book. She is in the tub. She is walking. She is watching a show. She's doing whatever she wants to do, and nobody needs her for anything.
Mm-hmm.
You give her that gift 2, 3 hours a week, and then you take her on a fun date every single week, and you remind her why she chose you, and that you're going to keep the relationship going. Right? If you can do those two things, man, you'll see a different wife. I promise you, 99% of girls, you do those things for a couple months, you won't recognize some of those negative patterns that you've been seeing.
Yeah, it's really interesting how women do this, especially when it comes to their children, right? That totally selfless, which, if not properly checked, can become really codependent. And they give too much of themselves away, so that later on they want to take back from the kids, and that of course affects the kids. But I think what's interesting is that men don't realize that they have a very similar tendency when it comes to work.
Mm.
And that guys can't, like women, like mothers can't put boundaries around their children. Men have a really hard time putting boundaries around their work.
It's true, man. Yeah, that one hits. That's true, man. It's very true. Those very much parallel. I definitely see that all the time. Where I don't know, maybe that comes from society, right? Where you're kind of taught early on as a guy. I bought into this lie. Like the first 2 years of marriage, when my wife would say, "Well, we don't connect," or "I don't feel like you care about me," I'd say, "Well, I make good money. We live in a good house. We drive good cars. What more do you want?" You know?
I've said the same things.
And it's so I guess we're programmed for that, but then I guess the women could say, well, I'm raising your kids, I'm giving them a great day and a great life, I'm baking the meals, I'm doing all this, I'm still working on the side, probably, I'm well, what more do you want? And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that's a really good parallel, man. I like that.
Yeah. um God, what was I gonna say? It had to do with, oh yeah, okay, so with the date night, and you're talking about making it fun and exciting. Now, this is something that I'm curious about. So what does that look like? Because I mean, you only have a certain number of hours, depending on where you live, what sort of different stuff do you do? So is it, give me an example of like a month of date nights with you
Yeah, I
guys.
mean, I always tell guys you don't gotta freak out about this, right? Just think about when you were first dating, put some effort into it, right? Like, dude, some of our dates we just go for walks together. We take a hike, we take a roadie sometimes, and just, dude, I'll ask her questions about, what's going on in your life? How can I meet your needs better, this or that? And then we'll just joke around a little bit, man. Flirt with her, have some fun. Like she again, You picked her over 3.5 million women in the world. She picked you over 3.5 billion guys in the world. Like, just have some fun together. So, I mean, last night I picked a restaurant, and guys, plan the date too. That's a big thing. Don't ask her, what do you want to do? Dude, she doesn't want you to say, what do you want to do? She wants for you to say, nobody needs you. Hey, just dress like this and we're going, you know? So last night we just went to probably a nicer dinner than we usually do, had a couple drinks, went to like a local little hole in the wall casino here, had a couple more drinks, and just, we had a fun time. We each took $20 and we played a 50-cent roulette game, and we bet who could win or lose the most. And we're kind of jawing at each other. I'm up a little bit here. You're down, we just had fun together, man. And so some of the dates are like that. Some of them I'll just do a little picnic. We live in Vegas, so there's a million things to do here, but you don't have to roll out red carpet every single week. Just make it so you two are connecting. Dude, brush your teeth, look presentable, like, just show her that you care and that you're putting effort into it. I think that's the main thing, right? And that you are prioritizing her over everything. You're putting work on hold, you're putting the kids on hold, you're putting everything on hold to show her how much you care about her and that you care about this relationship a lot. And I think that speaks volumes to her.
Yeah, it's interesting how, we have in the honeymoon phase, I think there's a lot of people think it disappears because the novelty's worn off. And there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that. But I think what people forget is that you actually try in the beginning.
It's so true.
It's like you want that new person to look at you as an attractive individual, and you want them to be drawn towards you. And so you put work into how you look, how you come across. A lot of guys in the beginning met, and it's really interesting to me how in the beginning of dating, even guys who are like really not that masculine they almost like puff up their chest. They step up a little bit more. It's almost like there's something innate in them, something primordial that gets them to like just be a little bit more assertive with stuff, and correspondingly the woman to be a little less assertive, right?
Yeah.
And then once they get the other person, once the other person's like, this person likes me, this person wants to be with me, it's like, got him.
There's a natural tendency, man. You just see that, right? And most of the guys that come to me, I think, are in that spot where they say, man, I got the girl, we got the house, we got everything safe and comfortable, and I just let myself go. Like, I'm 40 pounds overweight. It didn't happen overnight. It's little by little. We're kind of more roommates. Didn't happen overnight, but it's little by little. And so I think, wherever you find yourself on that, you could have let yourself go for a decade like that. But I think today, if you're listening to this, can be day one. And that's the most exciting thing to me, and the coolest thing about being a human being is, dude, I was at the lowest point, I think, of my life 4.5, 5 years ago that night. I mean, bro, I'm not ashamed to say it. I cried for like hours that night, just thinking of how much I had wasted of my life, man, of just how, I was kind of living for other people. I wasn't being the best version of myself. I mean, just got to the point where I was like, they started out sad tears and they were tears of rage. And they were like, all right, God, I promise you and myself, I'm changing. But wherever you're at today, this can be the first day, right? You can not be in a great marriage. Maybe you're a single guy listening to this and you say, man, I want a relationship, but I've just been, you're playing video games 9 hours a day, bro. You got to make some changes. Today can be the day that you say, man, I'm gonna change my life around. Today's the first day of my life. I'm gonna take the next step the next day, the next step. I'm just gonna get up and better myself and better my life every single day. And to me, there's nothing more exciting than that as a human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Well said. I mean, I'm thinking, so practical steps for some guys.
Go to the gym.
Go to the gym. Yeah, go to the gym. So, I mean, do you think that guys need to get into, like, talk about fitness and the role with this stuff? Talk about fitness and faith, because I think these are kind of like really two pillars of a lot of, what anchors you.
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, number one, I think you need to know who you are, right? And so, brother, I went on 4 or 5 dates with my wife when I was living in Chicago at the time. I met her. I told all my friends I'm gonna marry this girl. I'm like, dude, she's perfect. She's beautiful. Like, she's so hot. She's nice to everybody. She doesn't talk bad about other women. I love this girl. After 4 or 5 dates, I knew I was gonna marry her. And bro, then she saw my old social media and like, that I was like this party dude at nightclubs, and she decided she didn't want that. And I remember she called me and said, "Hey, it's been an awesome 4 or 5 dates, but I'm gonna have to cut this off." And I remember what I said to her, man. And I tell other guys this. I said at the time, I said, well, I said, you know what? My life is going to be great either way. I said, I kind of had this vision of you and me together, and I've seen where it's going to go. And I think it can just be absolutely amazing. But yeah, if you choose to do that, you know what? It'll be amazing with somebody else. So, I guess it is what it is. I'm not going to beg you, I'm just going to keep working on myself. Dude, she
Mm.
texts back in 30 minutes, like, okay, I told that wasn't me. I'm a new guy. And so I think you need to have that confidence and know where that confidence comes from. Now, for me, man, again, if you tell me you hate me, if I walk down the road and somebody says you're this or that, brother, I know who I am. I'm a child of God. He designed every hair on my head. He created me. So that's where a lot of my confidence comes from. But let's be honest also, it comes from getting up at 5:05 every morning and getting my butt to the gym, or getting
Mhm.
my butt out to the pull-up bar, or getting my butt in the park and running sprints. And as a man, I think we're so comfortable now. And this is where I was. I'm not judging anybody 5 years ago, man. When I put on 20 pounds, dude, I was so comfortable. I mean, my house had to be between 68 and 72, or I was going to complain about it. I hop in a warm shower every day. I get a warm bed, a warm car. I sit in a comfy chair all day. Society, dude, you could push a button and food is delivered to your door. Like, unlimited channels on demand. And so I just decided, man, I'm not going to be so comfortable. And I think the way you grow as a man, it's always outside your comfort zone. And
Mhm.
so for me, man, I haven't had TV now in 3.5 years. We don't have it. We don't have HBO. We don't have Hulu. We don't have cable. We don't have any of this stuff, right? Like, I'm going to be learning things. I'm going to be reading. I'm going to be bettering myself every day. I get up whether I feel like it or not, man. And again, we've adopted 2 sons. We have a third child. We had times, man, where we had 3 1-year-olds in our house plus our daughter. I didn't sleep, man, for like 4 or 5 months, but the odds of all 3 of them sleeping through the night were not good. So I still got up, and the workout might not have been perfect, but it got done. And I think the more you prove to yourself over and over again, this is who I am. When I tell myself I'm up at 5:05, boy, I'm up at 5:05. I don't care if I went to bed at 4:05. I'm up because I told myself I was going to do it. And the more you do that as a man, the more your confidence grows. And now it's like, look, if I told myself today, man, I'm gonna give myself a couple years, I'm gonna scale my business to 100K a month. I have no desire to do that, by the way. But if I did, I would do that. I know that I'd just hire the right mentors. I'd put in the work. That would cost me more than I'm willing to pay on the back end of family and probably fitness and all these other things I prioritize. But I think it's just when you have a vision and you say, this is what I want out of life, and then you wake up every day just, dude, on fire. And again, you go back to the first thing you said, how are you so positive? I'm excited, bro. Like,
Yeah.
I get up and I get to push myself every day to grow spiritually, physically, mentally, in relationships. The only things that matter to me, I don't know what Tom Brady and Giselle are doing. I don't know what the Kardashians are doing. I don't know what these other people are doing, but I'm focused on my mission, my circle, my people, my family. And to me, that's just really exciting.
Yeah, I think this is so important. I think this is really the unifying factor here, because you're very positive, and you're focusing, you're giving so much to your wife and to your family. You're a dedicated family man. You're dedicated to your wife, which is maybe less apparent for others. But I think this unifying factor here is that you understand what it means to be a man fundamentally. And it is this pushing. And I think one of the reasons that for men so much of this has disappeared is because we live in, I don't want to say we live in a consequence free era, but we live in an era where the consequences are so much more subtle and gradual
Mm,
that we don't see them happening at first. You not waking up at 5:05 in the morning in a given day, that single action, it doesn't do anything to you. To
mm.
your grandfather, your great grandfather on a farm, that could be a big problem because the
And they
cows
didn't
get
eat.
milked, and there's a lot of stuff. They had to get up, they had to start
Right.
doing things. We can say, I'll just call it in today. I don't have to do it. I don't have to do it. And it's more of this gradual decay,
Mm.
and it's a decay in the spirit of being a man. And so guys are looking to try to be comfortable, as you said, try to be comfortable. And this is the paradox I think that guys don't realize, is that all these gifts that you want from a woman, you only get them when you focus on being a man.
Mm.
And then the woman's like, he's a man, so I can give this to him. But if the guy's looking at the woman like, give me this, then it's like you're still in this mommy mode.
Dude, yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there, man. Like, I can think back to when my wife and I's relationship changed. The day, the moment it did, and we lived close to our families, and I was always like, don't, oh, her parents stopped by unannounced. Oh, my parents want to take the kids. My wife didn't like it, but I don't want to upset anybody, I just don't want to upset anybody. I think that's what kids do. They try and keep the peace. And I'll never forget when I was on this self-improvement journey, man, and I wrote this super long email and I tagged everybody in our family on it. And it said, this is, as the man of my house and as my wife, this is the boundaries we are setting. This is what we expect. If you want to see your grandkids, this is what you will do. And this is what we're doing. I've never seen my wife run into a room, put the kids down for a nap faster, and just, man, she told that was so attractive to her, when again you go back to that, can you delay, can a man, he chooses discipline over that short-term dopamine, right? And I think that even goes back to porn. A real man doesn't want to look at some other guy having sex. He doesn't, he can delay that short-term pleasure for what's better to come. A real man says, man, we're only in human history a couple hundred years, man, before, dude, like you said, the consequences of not getting up, of not being physically in shape. Dude, if this was 200-300 years ago, you just didn't live. You
Yeah.
just, a warring tribe came in and slaughtered you, But now we don't have those things to deal with. And so the temptation is, let's just relax. Let's just get the dad bod. Let's just get the whatever. And so if you don't seek out community and men and other people that want these things too, and you don't have that kind of discipline to get up and do things, maybe you don't feel like it or not. Let's be honest, you're not really worthy of that respect.
100%. I think it's like, when we're disciplined on a regular basis, then when we do want to take a break and unwind, it's like we can allow that container also to occur too. We can be disciplined in allowing ourselves to like party, have a
Yeah.
good time, and without any guilt.
Mm-hmm. That's
We don't
exactly
have
what I mean.
to hinge on that.
Hey,
Yeah.
dude, I'm not grind mode 24/7, man. I intentionally schedule 2 walks every day, man. Like, where I go out, I have 2 hours a day where I just play with my boys in the park, scheduled off every day. I have times where I got buddies flying into Vegas here in 3 weeks. I got the whole weekend. Just, dude, we got rooms on Vegas. I'll be drinking. I'll be having a good time. Like, it's not like you need to never have fun to be a man. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying be intentional about it. There's a
Mhm.
big difference, and even Halloween's here, man. There's a big difference between enjoying mindfully a couple pieces of candy and having full control over it and saying, you know what, this tastes really good. I'm going to enjoy this bite. Or eating your 19th piece when you're just miserable anyway, but you don't have the self-control to stop. There's a big difference between that. Kids and boys can't control that impulse. I got 2 2-year-olds. They can't. They'll literally eat the sugar till they die, probably. But as a man, you need to be able to say, I know what's best for me long term. I can delay gratification. I can see a vision of where I want my life to go and make sure I get there.
A last question for you before we close this off. I know you got to go do some trick or treating.
And we get to trick or treat here in yeah, like 10 minutes or so.
You talked about dopamine and about putting boundaries. Porn, obviously, that's something that you want to get rid of, and you did get rid of. Television, what's the value added in that? What about social media? Because social media, this is something that, if you are going to be an influencer and you want to get your message out there, you have to use it, but it can have very similar, dopaminergic effects where you get pulled in. So how do you manage that? How do you set boundaries around social media?
Couple things, man. I mean, I learned a couple of these the hard way, just because when you're trying to grow a business and you're, like, you just learn some of these the hard way. But number one is your thoughts in the first thing in the morning. Don't touch your phone. You need to have your original thoughts coming in before you see other people's thoughts. So when my alarm goes off, man, every day I chug 2 waters. I write what I'm grateful for. I pray and meditate over that. I kind of visualize myself how I want to be for that. I visualize myself on this podcast, being high energy, coming in, talking to you. I visualize myself coming and throwing my kids around, having a great time, being a good husband, all the things I want to do for the day. and then I go get movement in, and then I get to my phone.
Mhm.
So you need to make sure that you're winning first. I always say this, man. Like, people are like, well, I think I've tweeted dude 102,000 times over the last 34 months since I've been on Twitter. I got 90,000 ish followers, something like that, now. And people are always like, well, how do you put out content? And the best piece of social media advice I ever got was my boy Zach Hommel, like a few years ago, when I was just starting to go, and I hired him as my coach. And he said, don't ever worry about what you're going to tweet. Worry about living an awesome life, and then just share it.
Yeah.
So, dude, if you look at a lot of my tweets, man, it's just what my family's doing, dude.
Yeah.
The day that I stop tweeting, I'm still going to be doing the same stuff. Like, if I were to just disappear from Twitter, I'd still be doing the same thing every day. I just wouldn't be like hitting the tweet button at the end of it a lot of times. So I think you got to really, you have to understand that there's 100,000 influencers out there, millions of them out there, all saying the same messages. Lift weights, a lot of things we talk to. Don't look at porn, all these positive things. But to me, to stand out and be different, you got to show the receipts, man. You got to show that you live it. You got to be on fire. There's a reason I've met 400 or 500 people now off Twitter, and I live in Vegas, so that's easy. There's not a week that goes by now that I don't have somebody hit me up. Bro, I'm in Vegas. Can we meet for a lift or something? I love that, because I'm the same person as I am on there as here, and I don't have to worry about, do I need to make them think a certain way or this or that? Dude, I'm just going to go be me, And so I think if you're going to share on social media, if you're going to use social media, you need to be very mindful of that, of being authentic, being you. I share struggles on there, man. When I'm not one of these guys who's like, dude, I'm fired up to go to the gym every day. There's a lot of days, 5:05, you just got to get there. I don't feel like it. You just got to get there. I say that, you just got to go. And you need to be mindful about what your message is, and that, being real and authentic, I think, helps a lot. And then just setting boundaries around it. My wife's helped me with that a lot too, where I have times in my day now where I just don't have my phone. A couple hours, man. And I think you have to do that.
That's amazing. Yeah. Good advice. I'm going to take some of it.
This is something I'm always working on, to be perfectly honest. When you love what you do, you could do it 24/7. I always tell my wife, like, if we didn't have kids, I'd have a $100 million business, because I like coaching people. I like that I could scale it. I could have coaches under me. I could really like this too much,
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to, what do you want to win at life? What do you want your overall mission, and kind of what do you want to be known for? Great on social media? Not really. Like, I'd rather my kids remember dad being there,
That's a perfect thing to end on. Tyler, thank you so much for this interview. This was fantastic.
Bro, that went fast, man. That was crazy.
I know. There's but so much good vibes. I mean, I think that we were hammering. It was pure gold, segment after segment after segment. I mean, you just were really. I think this is going to shift a lot of guys, because guys want to know the truth. They want to become men, right? They want to leave this sort of boyhood, this Peter Pan world. But I think, unfortunately, so many of the really masculine role models have, I mean, and it's not all negative, right? I don't want to, but there can be almost too much darkness in it.
For sure.
There's too much ego. And if you're a guy who has an open heart, I mean, you do need to maybe develop a strong sense of self, and a sense of, like, your own value. Sure. So in that sense, you can say having a good ego is good. It's a positive thing. But they get caught up in, like, it being about them, and then they get distorted because they don't feel good about maybe treating their wife in this certain way. They don't, and it actually affects their frame, and it creates all sorts of dissonance, where they're trying to act alpha, but then they're shaming themselves for trying to be connected to her. And I think, I really so much appreciate your energy and your message, because I think that you show a lot of what that integration looks like for guys. So I really do appreciate having you on.
I appreciate you, brother. I'd love to work with you in any kind of capacity. We should run a retreat together, man. I would love to do some things like this, man. You're always a guy, again, I've really looked up to. You're super intelligent. And you're great. I mean, I've learned from you on this, just the way I can see the wheels turning a lot when you're thinking about a lot of these questions to ask. It's no wonder you're great at what you do too, man. So I appreciate you, and it's been an honor to come on, man.
I appreciate that, Tyler. Where can people find you? Obviously on Twitter. I want to put all the links below, but just
Yeah, Twitter at Ty Romper, same on Instagram. Ty Romper, that was my poker name back in the day. Really growing on YouTube now. Got 2,500 or so subscribers and putting out weekly content on there, motivational, fatherhood, podcasts, things like that. That's just my name, Tyler Todt, Todt. But yeah, man, just come say what's up on any of those platforms. Pretty much where I'm at.
What are your services? What do you offer, guys?
So I do one-on-one coaching where it's just holistic life coaching, man. I have a whole range of clients. I have guys that I had my first billionaire client here a couple months ago who just came and said, bro, I follow you on Twitter and I have all the money and the toys, but I'm not grateful. I'm always stressed. I want to get better at this. So, just working with him daily on getting better at these. I got guys who just want to be better fathers and more present. I got guys who just want to get in shape, man. They got dad bods and they just want to get in better shape, right? I have guys that hire me almost like a spiritual kind of, hey man, I want to grow my faith, right? I'm new to this. I want to learn. And so do a lot of one-on-one coaching. Also do a group coaching with my boy, Mike Schiff. Shout out to Mike. He's a great dude. We run that a couple times a year. I do some social media growth too for help some other people with that. But yeah, man, so that's what I do. I've written a few books, little ebooks and things like that. Just wrote a children's book with my mom actually about reframing your thoughts. That'll be out here in about a month or so too. I'm pretty pumped for that.
That's amazing. Tyler, I know you got to go, but can I ask you one last quick question?
Yeah, for sure.
I meant to ask it and it slipped by. You talked about praying with your wife. That is something that I haven't done, and I've heard of some spiritual, very in touch with God individuals doing it. Can you just say real briefly like what you experience as a result of doing that?
And it's something I need to be better at, to be honest. Like it's something that when I'm really locked in, I'm doing it a lot more. But I can find myself going weeks without doing it, But man, it's so powerful to invite God into our marriage. And we do a little devotional a lot of nights, and we have a little book that it's real easy, man. One page, it has a power thought, and then I'll just pray over our family. I set a goal to pray over our kids once a week too. When they sleep, I go in and just pray over them and just invite God into our home, into our marriage, into our relationship. And then I feel like, man, maybe you don't agree on something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Man, when you're praying together and you have that kind of connection, you can kind of see that other person for what they are. They're not your enemy. We want the same thing. We're arm in arm praying an hour ago. Just because I said something dumb here a minute ago, should give me more of a pass, right? Like, so I think that's something that more guys, myself included, need to make a habit of it, and that's something my dad's really imposed on me these last few years. Is him and my mom pray together every morning now. Now they have the time, man. By the time I get home from the gym, dude, we're 4 poop diapers in. It's probably hard to just clear everything and go, but I think that's a big thing that all men, myself included, can improve upon.
Thank you so much, Tyler. I appreciate it. Go have fun trick or treating.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Thank you, boss. And I'll talk to you soon, Pat. Thanks, man.
Gracias.